Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, see how effective research communication is when we start research from the grassroots. This is an important start, especially if the aim of a person is to involve in a research and come up with something new. So we are going to start with a general background of what research is all about before we link the idea to how to communicate the findings or research effectively. I will start with the general background of what research methodology is all about. The word research encompasses two syllables. Re is a prefix, meaning again and then again. While search is a verb, meaning to investigate. So the combination of this syllable form a word research. The term simply means to investigate or to find out a new thing that is unknown. In the act of investigation with the aim of finding out what is unknown, it is a process of going from unknown to known. Is what is called a research. Research is categorized into various types. It depends on the objective or the purpose in which a person is working on. It can be quantitative research, qualitative research, or mixed research. Quantitative research is also categorized into various categories, like we have quantitative primary research, quantitative secondary research, and qualitative research. So these approaches or types of research depend on the objective or problem at hand. Your problem will determine which type of research you go into. If your objective is to deal with a quantitative secondary data, to source data from a reputable or standard organization, maybe government organization, the person can go and start a quantitative secondary research. If the objective is to test hypothesis, that is to come up with idea directly from respondent, a person can go and start a quantitative primary research, while qualitative primary research is when a survey, this is what is called qualitative research. So there is what is called mixed research. This combines all the types of research mentions, whether qualitative, quantitative, secondary, quantitative primary. When you combine the two, is what is called mixed research or triangulation research. There are some process or a series of steps a researcher needs to take into consideration before starting his research. This series of steps start from problem identification to the report of the findings. Initially, a researcher is expected to start with identifying the problem. This problem can be identified from the initial organization or the problem that a researcher has initially at hand. A researcher can identify the problem, then delve himself into what is called literature review. When you identify the problem, the next step is to move into literature review. This literature review is categorized into various categories or steps. We have what is called conceptual literature. We have theoretical literature. We have empirical literature review. A researcher is expected to start with a conceptual literature, while some concept related to the problem is expected to be explored by the researcher in his report or in his problem. Then a researcher can move to what is called theoretical literature, where theories related to the problem, the foundational theories, as well as the theoretical framework is expected to be explained by the researcher related to problem under investigation. These theories may be related to the problem or study that is under investigation. A researcher is expected to find a relevant theory, one theory that will serve as a foundation to his work or problem. This is what is called theoretical framework. That is apart from the foundational theories. A researcher must find a single theory that is more related to the work apart from the foundational theory. So then next, the researcher is expected to move what is called to construct the hypothesis. After the researcher delves into literature review, then the next is to come up with a working hypothesis. These hypotheses are tentative statements or are propositions from the problem identified. A researcher is expected to come up with a proposition, assumptions that are expected to be tested at the end of the research, that a researcher is expected to discuss in his findings based on the problem, are related to the problem of the study. That is what is called the hypothesis from a research problem. Then a researcher is expected to move into what is called research design. The research design will include the sampling design, population of the study. The researcher will define his population, the sample to be selected from the population, and also some material and method to be used in that study or report. A researcher is expected to explain and properly explore in this part of the study. Next, the next task is the researcher can move to what is called data collection method. After problem was properly identified, a critical literature review was examined. Then the next, the researcher, after the hypothesis has been explored, then the researcher will move to what is called data analysis. The data analysis encompasses the data identified from the problem and the data that the literature suggested that the researcher will use. A researcher is expected to report the data, interpret the data, and communicate the data to the audience or final consumers. So this research process is applicable to any type of research. The process is the same, but the context is different. It depends on which type of research the researcher is into, but the process is the same. Ethical guidelines, validity and reliability are expected to apply in this process of research methodology. Having defined this research process from the scratch, a researcher is expected to make a structure or structuring his work. This research structure contains an idea that a researcher had from the problem identified, from the literature review, from the methodology structured, from the data that a researcher proposed to you. A researcher now is at the stage of reporting the result to the final consumers, to the final audience. A researcher is expected to follow some processes that are acceptable generally to review or to provide his findings to the final audience. So to structure, why structure matters? That is the questions. Structure transforms scattered thought idea into a coherent or logical flow. It is essential for academic writing and professional report, allow readers to quickly locate findings and interpret results. In this case, the idea generated from initial step of preparing a researcher is expected to organize such idea in a meaningful way. That is what is called research structuring. In this case, the first step is organizing or organization of the work. A researcher is expected to organize his work in accordance of the rule of research. There is a standard way in which a researcher or every writer is expected to organize his writing, starting from introduction, body, and conclusion. This is a general way in which a person or a researcher can organize his research. Now, these steps can contain some sub-steps, which may be applicable to the type of research that the researcher is into. It may be the abstract or title of the research will come first. when organizing a research. The title and abstract should be at the forefront. In this case, a researcher is expected to provide a preamble of the research or the content of the research, which include the objective, the methodology used or material used, and the findings. All these are expected to appear in the preamble or abstract of the research or report which a researcher wants to submit. Then the next is introduction. In this introduction, a researcher is expected to include what is not in the abstract, meaning to expand the preamble or abstract in detail. An introduction should contain the summary of the entire work. This text should contain the summary of the entire work, starting from the background of the study, what initiated the idea of the study. If it is global study, the researcher can look at the study from the global perspectives in his introduction, then localize the problem and link the problem to the local context in which a researcher is working on. So now the introduction is expected to contain all the information in the research from the beginning to the end in detail. Then the next is the background, and this background may contain some subheadings. It depends on the type of research that a researcher is into. The background is expected to contain some background history of the problem that you are working on. This background history, if it is a case study research, the case study or the focal point should be identified and explained properly in the introduction so that the readers may be able to understand the study or the report from the grassroots. This may include literature review. Your literature that you review initially should be presented in this part of the report. This literature review contains conceptual literature, some basic concepts, empirical and theoretical literature are expected to be explained in this part of the work. Then the next is literature gap. This literature gap include the gap or what does your study want to contribute in relation to the previous study. For example, if Mr. A finding is different from Mr. B findings, is different from Mr. C's finding, what do you want to do or what you intend to do that is different from Mr. A, Mr. B, and Mr. C that already exists? So when we say research gap, we are talking about a new idea that you come up with in the process of literature review that has not been done in the literature. No one has done it, but you are trying to come up with it and use it in your research. This is what is called a literature gap. And this literature gap can be a conceptual gap, maybe a theoretical gap, maybe a gap that you want to add in term or in form of variable use. Maybe somebody used a particular variable in his research that you think that variable is inappropriate to you. So you may decide to introduce a new variable that you think that variable is more appropriate. So by doing so, we can say that you add gap to the literature, you contribute to the literature. This is what is called a research gap and should be part of your background or research design. Then the next is research methodology. The process that your research follows. Is your research a quantitative research? It is a qualitative research or mixed research. For your report to be valid, you are expected to explain these in your methodology or methodology design. This will help the readers to easily identify which type of research you adopted. Whether you adopt qualitative research, if it is qualitative research, you should specify the number of interviewees, the people that participated in the research. If it is quantitative research, primarily, you should specify the number of people that you issued questionnaire to, then you explain and state their number, tell the readers how you distributed the questionnaire. You are expected to explain within this type of research. If it is quantitative secondary research, tell the readers How will you source your data? From which organization? Is this government organization, private organization? You are expected to tell the readers where you source your data. That is, if you are working on quantitative secondary research. Likewise, if it is mixed research, it's the same. You are expected to explain where you source your data, how you match, who you interview, and who you distributed questionnaire to. All these are expected to explain on the mixed research. Then the next is result presentation. For you to have a logical flow, you need to present your results. This result presentation will go in line with the discussion of the results. When you present your result, then you discuss with your result, and your discussion should be in line with your research objectives and the problem identified initially. Initially, on the process of your literature review, you identify some problems and you raise some certain questions that you want to answer at the end of your research. So this discussion of result should be in line with your problem identified, as well as your objective or research questions you raised at the beginning of your research. Then the next is to discuss your findings and make conclusion. So these steps are expected to have a logical flow. Your writing or write-up should have a flow from the beginning to the end. When I say should have a flow, you should start from general to specific. This is what is called a deductive method, a deductive approach. When an idea flows from general to particular, initially you started your research from problem identification, which is huge, which is large, which is general. You identify a huge problem, then you localize your findings based on the parameters or based on the variable you interpret at the end of your research. That is what is called from general to specific, or deductive approach. Or in other words, problem to specific. You identify problem and at the end you solve the problem based on certain parameters or based on a based on a particular given information. So now the next thing is, after organizing your research and your topic, your work is expected to follow this logical flow. After this logical flow, then the next thing is outlining and drafting. That is what is called outlining and drafting. Before you finish your final write-up, you are expected to outline and make a drafting. The blueprint of your draft should be intact. You will need to check properly some certain things in your work while you are preparing the work. Number one, topic outline. Headline is short phrases. For example, your topic initially, when you come to final write-up, your topic should be clearly stated and should be in short phrases. Your topic should have some certain features. Number one, your topic needs to specify the dependent and the independent variable in your research. Your topic needs to be simple, not ambiguous. Your topic needs to explain the problem that is into your research, need to give light, need to highlight the problem that is into the research. So these are the things that your topic is supposed to contain when making a draft or outlining your research work. Then sentence outline, headlines as complete. Subheadings and headlines should be complete. Follow the appropriate formatting procedure to make sure that your work is in line or is up to standard. Your work should be in form of logical flow, should follow a chronological problem solution or thematic. Be able to synthesize your work. Your work should be your ideas, many ideas that are the same. Synthesize them. Do not make repetition in the work. Synthesize ideas. This will help your work to have a flow and make your readers or consumers of the work to understand the flow of the work very well. Then after outlining, then drafting effectively, a reader, a researcher, or a report writer is expected to make a draft of the work, focus on writing, not perfection. You should focus on writing at the initial stage and later make it to be perfect. Focus on writing, make sure the ideas and problem identified are in the main outline. So when you come to the final report, your report will contain all the necessary items that it's supposed to contain. Then your structure, your topic, sentence, evidence, all this needs to be taken into account when drafting your work. Cohesion, use transition, and certain words also need to be taken into account. Then you need to make a revision before final submission. Check, such as clarity and grammar, spelling mistake, etc. need to be checked before the final submission of your work. So after this drafting, then the next is principle of presentation. How are you going to present your data? How are you going to communicate to the audience your data? In which form are you going to communicate? Which tools or techniques are you going to employ to communicate your data to your audience? And there are some principles for data presentation before you start drafting your tools for communication. There are some things that you need to take into consideration. Number one, clarity. Avoid clutter. Highlight essential information to prevent cognitive overload. Your data or information or a tools to be used should contain an important information for that particular data or variable that you want to communicate. Then accuracy. Ensure all numbers, level, and unit are properly verified before you plot your information on a particular graph or table that you want to communicate. Relevance. Only data or number or figures that are relevant to that particular information should be in that particular tool that you want to communicate. Then the next is consistent. You are expected to be consistency. Maintain uniform formatting across all table, figure, graph. You are not expected to use different formatting style. You use 13 format here, you use 14 here. Be uniform, be consistent across the work. Then simplicity, minimize non-detailing, excessive grid lines, colors, 3D, etc. Try and make it simple. Do not use excessive 3D style diagram. This will complicate your audience. On average, take a format that a layman can easily understand when you communicate it. So these are the principles of data presentation, and these are the guidelines that one needs to take into consideration before preparing his presentation or visual of data. So there are some tools or graphic visuals that are normally taken into consideration when reporting the result of the research or report. These graphic or visuals are many. It depends on which graph the researcher is familiar with or which graph tools or instrument a researcher is intended to use in his report or research. We have a table. A table contain a number of rows and columns. A table is used to present a data or to communicate the information related to a particular data to the audience. This table is normally used to present when a data is in different categories. For example, this table shows the number of production patterns in a particular month. In January, the target production is given and the production is given. Likewise, in April, the target production is given and the actual production is given. So in short, this table helps to communicate the production of a particular firm or company or industry within the month of January to April. in a particular year. Tables are ideal for displaying detail. So a table, when table is presented, it shows the audience that the data cannot be reported in text form, in words, because it's somehow voluminous, it's somehow tedious to report a data that can be reported in form of table in words, because the reader may not be convenient to go through the data. So table helps to summarize the data and communicate the data in a simple way. So the idea that you had already from problem identification, from literature review, when you come to data presentation, you can use table to present the data to show the audience that this is your findings. This is what you have from initial review that you have done. This is what you contribute. So you can use table to present your information to the reader or to the actual consumers of your research. Then the next we have the trend or a line graph. This is a line graph. It's normally used to show the trend or to prepare a trend analysis or using a particular data. For example, somebody that is working with secondary research, like quantitative secondary research, is expected to use a trend analysis. Trend analysis, you are trying to show the movement of a particular variable over time. For example, this trend or this graph shows the inflation rate in Nigeria from January 2010 to January 2025. It indicates that the inflation is trended upward, as we can see the graph trended upward, meaning that the inflation is increasing in the country over the year. By me looking, this will help the consumer of your research or the consumer of your report to easily identify that this country's inflation is increasing over the year from your findings. It is to summarize the data. It is in communicating the data to the final report consumer or research consumers. So trend analysis is normally used to show the movement of the series in a particular variable over a period of time. So we use trend to show that a variable is not stable over a period of time. We present this using what is called line chart. Line chart. So the next is bar chart. So we use this type of chart when we want to compare a group or categories. For example, if we can see here, we have a number of people, the population or number of people at different age group. We can see that 30 people are within the age of 10 to 25, 18 to 25 rather. 35 people are within the age of 29 to 35. 20 people are within the age bracket 36 to 45, and so on. So this helps to communicate the information, especially when you are dealing with a data that has a subcategories. Somebody that is into primary research or quantitative primary research may be inclined to collect a respondent information. This respondent information includes demographic profile of the respondent, which include age, his income level, education attainment, etc. So maybe all this data may be presented in form of bar chart. Bar chart will help to communicate properly than any other type of chart using this type of data. So using bar chart help to show the reader that you are trying to compare between one group and the other group. The next is a pie chart. This is normally show information from a particular sector or proportion, or the performance between some portions is presented normally using a pie chart. For example, we can see that here, this pie chart shows the sectoral contribution of gross domestic product in the year 2020. in the among the different sectors, which include agriculture, industry, service sector. So it's a kind of comparative analysis. From this, we can say that service sector contributed more to gross domestic product than agricultural sector and industry. So this will help the reader to understand the contribution of each sector in the economy at ease without any difficulty, rather than presenting just the data in form of statement or words that will become that will become tiresome for reader to read such kind of data. And then the next we have what is called infographic. So infographic are normally used to present data that is complex. It simplifies the complex data. If you are presenting many information at once, you use infographic style. Infographic style, it contains information from a specific environment, and that environment contains a number of sub-information that you cannot present using pie chart, using line graph, or using bar chart. So you are expected to use infographic chart to present such information. For example, like this infographic shows the global market activities over a period of time. Global market, we know it contains some activities, something like stock market, consumer spending, industrial production, global trade expansion, investment trend, and the performance of some subsector, which include the inflation in that. So in this global market may contain the information of a particular country that is into a particular global market, may contain the information of a particular region in the world related to the global market, may contain some information of the global market itself. So infographic style is important in communicating the data when it comes to complex data that is difficult to present using the other tools. So there are some designing effective visuals or key design principles that one need to take into consideration when designing his tools to communicate to the final users or consumers of your research. Now, there's one key message is limit each visual to a single primary insight. Each visual should contain a single primary insight. For example, what I have shown related to line graph, it contained the inflation information in Nigeria only. It contained only information related to inflation. All the series are inflation series or inflation observation over a period of time. So limit each visual to a single primary insight. Then visual hierarchy, use size and color to make the most important information stand out. Information that is vital in your research, information that is vital in your visual should be colored. This will emphasize the reader that this information is vital. Then readability, use contrasting color and include clear levels, unit, and legend. This is very important in presenting your tools or your visual to the final readers. And then tools, leveraging platform like Tableau, Power BI, Adobe Illustrator, or Professional Result. You can use these tools to construct more professional visuals that will be of importance to anyone. So in this case, the list is not exhausted. You can use Microsoft Excel also to build such kind of visuals. You can use some softwares, specifically statistical softwares, to build this kind of visuals, such as eViews, such as Stata. You can use R, you can use Python, and you can use programming softwares to build this kind of visual. So So after this data presentation or visual communicating, then the next is what your data can tell the final readers, what your data is trying to inform, what do you want to communicate to your readers? That is data, the data storytelling, storytelling, what you want to communicate. So now you are expected to explain all the tools you use to communicate, to explain them in words that will communicate the reader that you are trying to explain the tools. You are expected to explain properly the tools you presented in words, and this explanation should have a flow. You need to link with your research problem, your research questions, and your research hypothesis. In this part of your work, you are expected to make a link, a strong link between what you have identified, the data you presented, and the problem you are solving. You should have a connection because you are trying to explain the data you plot. And this data was constructed from the problem identified. So you need to have a link here by trying to emphasize the objective of the study and relate the data or visual with the objective of your study. Okay, there are some challenges. Now, define the problem or conflict. What issue is being addressed? You are expected to define the problem. You define the problem initially before, but you are expected to define the problem when you come to these states. Explain clearly the problem initially identified, then link the problem with your findings and make certain recommendations based on the problem. The next is you need to take certain action. Then what now? What next? What reasonable action are you going to take? That is, you need to make a proper recommendation. After you have clearly well explained your data, your visuals, your findings, then you provide a recommendation. Your recommendation should be based on your objective or research questions initially stated. And this recommendation will help in taking action related to the problem identified. It will help the authority or the policy makers to take appropriate action based on your problem initially identified in your report or research. The next is you are expected to give a certain recommendation as part of your data storytelling. Give certain recommendation, and your recommendation should be based on your objective also. You recommend based on your conclusion, based on your data, what your data tells you, then you give certain recommendation based on your data. This recommendation should be in line with the problem identified. This recommendation should be in line with your objective. This recommendation should be in line with the data you presented using visuals. There are some data storytelling techniques also that one needs to take into consideration, like crafting the narrative. Effective storytelling turns dry data into compelling narrative that drive actions. Your narrative should be flow in general, from problem, data, insight, then action. When I say problem, that is initial identified problem. Then insight, what you have in your data. After your little investigation, what you found, then action, a proper recommendation that should be taken. Your work should follow like that. Should have problem, data, insight, and action. Every work, extended work should have this kind of flow. Then humanized data include real-life example or case in your data. As you are reporting your data, you are telling a story, then make a certain example or make a real, try citing a real case study. For example, in an empirical research, one can decide to use a previous research as example. For example, if you are working on inflation and economic growth in Nigeria, and a lot of research has been done related to this. So if your finding shows that there is a positive relationship between inflation and economic growth in Nigeria, then you are expected to cite the findings of other researchers in the literature, like Mr. A, Mr. B also found that there is positive relationship between inflation and economic growth in Nigeria. Or this is contrary to the finding of Mr. C and Mr. Z, that there is an inverse relationship between inflation and economic growth in Nigeria. In short, your data, your research, your findings need to be supported with evidence, example, case study, or previous studies that have been conducted related to your research. Then focus, keep message simple and highlighting by the key metrics. Your message should be simple. Do not use ambiguous words. Use simple words to communicate your information to the readers. Then visual integration. Use visual to reinforce, not to decorate your story. Just present what is presentable. And what is not presentable, find other way to present it. Because there are some information that you cannot present them on a graph. For example, somebody that is into empirical research and that is into complicated statistical and machine learning techniques, these findings cannot be presented using table or visual tools. The tools that are normally used are regression and correlation. So you are expected to present the table of regression and correlation and explain each parameter in relation to your research questions or research findings. Interpret each parameter based on research questions, based on the problem identified, and make a case study, cite a case study that is in line with such parameter and that will easily help to boost the reliability of your parameter identified in the regression. So I think this is all about data storytelling and effective research communication from grassroots to the data visuals.